here in Boston, visiting a friend. Shout out Emilio. He goes to Harvard. Just saying hello during my fall break. During the past month and a half, a whole lot of stuff has been happening. And so I've been feeling the need to unpack the past 3 years of my college experience. And hopefully you can take something away from what I've done so far in the past 3 years, freshman to junior year, and then kind of go through a bit of the struggles and the lessons I learned throughout this journey. So I'd say my college career or experience started the ending of my senior year of high school. At the time, I was going into Cornell wanting to do food science with a minor in real estate. The way I wanted to tackle that was by becoming an associate real estate agent within the state of New York. And then by the time I was doing my minor in real estate, I was going to be a broker. So around the 2-year mark, you can become a broker in New York State. And then my junior year, I wanted to become a broker and do the minor as well as be a broker simultaneously. However, things shifted from that plan, especially when it came down to the beginning of my freshman year. So I ended my senior year by studying for the real estate exam in New York State. By the time my freshman year came around, I was prepared for the test, but I didn't really have transportation to get around to take the actual test in person. There wasn't an online exam at the time. And so what that meant was that I couldn't really take the real estate exam at the time. And then I also started deliberating about how I would go about showing apartments or houses in the area. And it probably wasn't going to be feasible, especially considering how much I was struggling at first with my gen ed credits, namely general chemistry and my bio credit, which was Bio 1440, which anyone at Cornell knows is not the easiest class to take. As a result, I ended up not taking the sales associate exam to become a real estate agent in New York State, but I decided to focus more on my studies at the time. And I think that was a good decision on my part, especially considering me not understanding how hard college classes were in comparison to high school classes and having a social life as well on campus. So that's kind of the end of my original plan going into college. And I think for most college students, being able to essentially take the L and say, okay, this may not be the best thing for me is hard to do, but sometimes pretty necessary, especially if you think your focus should be somewhere else. And for me, that was just finishing out the degree. I had no idea how much harder or easier Cornell would be after that freshman fall. Now come freshman spring, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do for the summer. The summer before going to Cornell, I was working at a commercial kitchen, just making vegan cookies for a lady named Pamela Wasabi. She makes great cookies. Probably will put her link in the description. But in the process of figuring out what I wanted to do in the summer, I talked to my academic advisor. And I asked about pretty much any lab positions that I can have in the summer. And he said closer to May to come back and so that we can figure out what exactly I'll be doing in the lab, accommodations, and figure out how I'm going to stay in Ithaca for the summer pretty much. But then around March is when coronavirus happened. So I ended up going back home and finishing out the semester, which was not a great experience. If you ever want to understand how bad it was, I recommend searching up Another Great Look for Cornell on Reddit. What a time it was on Reddit during coronavirus. But dealing with Calvin and dealing with being stuck at home pretty much all day was pretty rough. But at some point, I reached back out to my advisor and I asked, what else can I do remotely? Essentially, they came back and said, you can write a review paper, or I can write a review paper. At the time of accepting that I wanted to do the review paper, I didn't really understand the gravity of what I was about to undertake. And the decision to write a review paper definitely sculpted the rest of my college experience from that point onward, and we'll get into that more. To begin, they had me do a literature review, which is basically looking up on Google everything pertaining to my topic. At first, they gave me 2 topics, monk fruit seed waste and applications associated with that, and avocado seed waste and applications associated with that. I essentially spent months looking for these resources, building a PowerPoint to present to the lab, my superiors and other individuals in the lab. And that went on until pretty much the beginning of the semester. Well, from around June to December, I figured out cosmetic applications for avocado seeds, bioplastic applications, food applications, and health applications, like studies done on rats and on cells. And by the end of that, I had a pretty good grasp on reading scientific literature, understanding scientific literature, and then compiling that information. And that process showed me how much I liked communicating complex concepts in a way that's understandable for most people. I'm starting to realize the workload associated with making this PowerPoint. I really need to speak up and advocate for myself and say, like, look, I'll do one, but doing both at this time isn't the best for me. Especially considering that at the time, I was also a TA, teaching assistant for general chemistry, which started in the summer as well and finished at the end of my sophomore fall semester. And that was another interesting time because that was another instance where I was distilling information for freshmen who didn't really understand the concepts, just showing an easier way of understanding the information that's put in front of them. And then during my TAing experience, and we're gonna go through a whole bunch of parallel timelines that are happening all at once. So right now, just to recap, I'm in the middle of writing a PowerPoint and then also TAing general chemistry on top of my usual classwork and social time, all that. And the 2 undertakings outside of college classes were pretty fun. Although stressful, I enjoyed them because I was distilling information down for other people in kind of like a teaching setting, but I wouldn't say I enjoyed being a teacher. So this was all happening from June to December. December comes around and I'm done TAing for general chemistry. And I'm also pretty much wrapped up on my PowerPoint. And now there's a transition from the PowerPoint to writing an actual review paper. And again, me saying yes to this, I did not really understand the gravity or the workload associated with writing a review paper. And I look back at it and I think that doing it during coronavirus was pretty advantageous because I saved a lot of time on just the commute to classes. And so within, I guess, the 3 hours that I would be walking from West Campus to Stocking Hall, if you want to know like that distance, you can look it up. But I saved a decent amount of time just not having to walk around, staying in my room, although not the best thing in the world. Definitely helped me get through the paper. And that was pretty much my only obligation outside of school, although a very intense one. I would say from January to March, I spent maybe 4 to 7 hours a day writing this paper. After March is when I start wrapping up the paper and figuring out what journals I want to submit my review paper to. That was not the hardest process, just understanding the journal's missions, their goals, and how my paper can align with that. During that spring semester, I was also applying to jobs. And again, like there's going to be a whole bunch of parallels that are happening all at once. And as I'm applying for these jobs, there are two notable interviews that I had. One with Cornell Labs, who I ended up working with that summer, and another with Conagra Brands. Both interviews went well, but I was given basically a deferment letter by Conagra Brands at the beginning of the summer. And I took the job with Cornell Labs in Geneva, New York. They're a CBD beverage formulator. And that is an extremely important part to a part two story that I may do for this. So the summer starts, and I'm really enjoying my time at Corona, really enjoying CBD beverage formulation and the people I'm meeting, the information I'm learning. And keep in mind that I used to be really into real estate, and then just seeing that the Fed was printing money, I was interested in how that would affect the broader real estate market at the time. And so I started getting into stocks. I guess more keeping informed with what's going on, whether through Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal. I had a sophomore year project, which was the review paper, presentation, and writing of it. That's currently submitted, out of mind, out of sight at this point. And I'm just like, why not make learning about the stock market a junior year project? Now, at the time, it wasn't the right time to learn about the stock market. Instead, just kind of laid back, enjoyed junior year for a little bit. But coronavirus was also the time for podcasts being booming, right? It kind of became a passion project, and the podcast serves a whole lot of purposes. I don't think I've shared. One of them being helping me with my public speaking, helping me with my communication skills. Another one being having a platform for my friends and classmates to showcase their knowledge and their skills in a setting that isn't a resume, where you can really get in depth with what you've done in a summer experience or at school. And then the third one was to provide information for people who don't know much about pretty niche industries. So for me, for example, food science isn't very well known. Others may be biostatistics or understanding the life of academia, or understanding different engineering fields, which I hope to have in the near future as content for the channel. But that's what the podcast has kind of turned into. And so that whole process started November in my junior year fall. And then kind of was getting the materials together, figuring out how to edit, figuring out audio, all these different things for the podcast. And then I hear back from a journal. pertaining to my review paper. And so sometime in the summer, the original journal that I published to rejected the paper, and my lab decided to submit one more time to another journal. This journal came back with a lot of edits that needed to be done, and this was around Thanksgiving time. During that time, I was scrambling to both finish those edits. I think I crunched it out in 4 days, and also film the first episode for my podcast, just a dry run, which hasn't released yet. There's a lot of work that needs to be done for that, but I said before that the review paper kind of shaped my college experience inadvertently. Once I learned that the review paper can come back at any time with a relatively short turnaround time, and there may be a lot of work involved to get it ready for submission, I realized that I may have to trade off any clubs that I wanted to do my junior year on top of the podcast to kind of just focus on the paper whenever it comes, and then just do the podcast on the side, and kind of manage my time in between classes and the podcast, and try and fit in the review paper whenever it comes back. And so this was a pretty stressful time in my life because I didn't know when the paper would come back, and it turned out to be around every 3 months. We got some feedback, but we didn't know that at the time, or no one knew that at the time. So I just kind of kept doing other things while just waiting for this impending cloud of a review paper to come back and bite me in the butt in the middle of like a random exam or something. I don't know. So that kind of took me out of a lot of the group setting clubs that I wanted to be a part of. So my junior year, the review paper set the tone for my junior year. Just kind of waiting on that, plus doing the podcast. But around 3 to 4 weeks before my Conagra Brands summer experience, which I got an offer for the beginning of my junior year, the paper comes back for more edits. These edits were somewhat minor, but if you're unfamiliar with the review process of any academic paper, they send you things to correct, and then you have to correct those things and then address every point that they made in their comments, saying how you fixed the problems that they had with the paper.
Hey everyone, this is Albert from the future, back in the original setup. I decided to cut this episode short because there's a lot more to it that ties into what's going on right now that I'd like to share in a part 2, potentially a part 3. I appreciate you guys for watching this far. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and see you on the next one.